The Strategy and Policy Committee meeting this 10th of April 2024. We're going to open the meeting with our karakia, and I think Judd's going to offer that for us. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Karakia timitanga. E oha ki runga ki a ranganui. E oha ki raro ki a papatūnuku. Tura kina ngā mea kino ki te pai ātea. Ui mai o ka a korowai a aroha. He taonga mamata ki puta ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama. Haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Judd. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Philippa Baker-Hogan. Are there any other apologies?
I doubt it'll be an issue given the size of the agenda, but I do need to be gone by 2 o'clock.
That's about when I think we should be finished, before that. So I'll take that you'll move that apology. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Charlotte. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to items of business today? No. Then we've got confirmation of the minutes from the, is it the 15th of February? Has everybody had the opportunity to look at those, read those minutes? And are we prepared to move them as a true and correct record? Charlotte's going to move that, and I think Glenda looks like she might second it. Thank you very much. No debate. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, moving right on to the reports to the committee. First up is 5.1, review of gambling venues policy. Welcome, Hannah and Elise.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm not going to take you through the report point by point because it's very data heavy. Basic conclusions here are that the gambling venues policy needs to be reviewed every 3 years, which is quite a short review time frame as far as policies and bylaws go. There's nothing out there suggesting that any of the stuff that we're doing in the gambling venues policy is inappropriate. There's nothing new that we could be doing that we're not currently doing. The policy as it stands currently still represents among the best measures that we can take in managing gambling harm within the community. And it will be up for review again in 3 years under the legislation, so we're not recommending any further changes at this time. And I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions. Oh, and apologies for all of the jargon in the report, by the way. It's just kind of like that, but I understand it makes it a bit difficult to read.
Thank you, Hannah. Any questions? It all seems pretty self-evident, well backed with evidence, and with, given that it's working as best as we can, it makes sense to deal with it.
Very happy to move.
I was looking for the right word. That's sort of very happy to deal with it succinctly. Can I do that? Yes. All right. So, no questions. I said thank you to the presenters, didn't I? Yes. So, Jenny has offered, Councillor Jenny has offered to move that. Would someone like to second the recommendation? Which, just so we're, where is it? Oh, it's in the box there. That the committee accepts the review of the gambling venues policy. So, no, I've got a mover. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Josh. Josh and Jenny would like to speak to this item. Jenny, do you want to go first?
Yep. Just super briefly, thank you very much to the writers of this report. I strongly support it. If we could go further, I would go further, but I appreciate that we're not able to. I look forward to the time when we can. So thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Josh.
Thank you, and just briefly as well, I just wanted to highlight point number 20 in the agenda, which refers to the amount of revenue that's come into the community in 2022 from Class 4 gambling venues. And I just want to highlight again how bizarre and preposterous it is that in 2024, or in the 2020s, that community organisations, that sports organisations and trusts are still forced to rely on revenue from gambling, from problem gambling, to support the well-being of residents in this community. I think it's absurd that they need to make that choice in this day and age, and I hope that we can collectively right across the country put pressure on the government to come up with a better model, because this is not that model. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Nicely said. Nobody else wants to speak to this? All right, then we'll put the recommendation that the Strategy and Policy Committee accepts the review of the gambling venues policy. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.2, Three Waters Reform Update. Local water done well. Welcome, Catherine.
Good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of this report is broadly unchanged, to provide you with an update on the legislation process, in particular the repeal of the Three Waters legislation that the previous Labour government brought in. Give you a little bit more detail on the key features of the replacement policy, Local Water Done Well, and update you on the work to establish the council's options under that policy, which is continuing at pace. The key points, I think, and we've sort of covered some of this in past brief updates to committee. The legislation was repealed in February, but change is still coming, and so we will have choice, but within the parameters set by government. We're currently in that options appraisal process, and I briefly set out some detail there around our options of going it alone, a regional or sub-regional entity within the Manawatu-Wanganui region, and looking at our options outside of that region. In the nature of these things, on Friday the Minister provided us with a bit more information about their plans, so if it's all right I will speak to that first and then take questions overall, because some things have just moved slightly in the intervening days. Nothing, however, really deviates us from that current work plan that we've set out. It's more that we've got more detail on the content of water service delivery plans, the plans to streamline the CCO establishment process, and confirmation of the legislative timeline. So some key points. One, a select committee process for that upcoming bill has been confirmed, and we're expecting that legislation to be introduced in the last week of April or the first week of May. That's the next time that Parliament is sitting after this week. They've also indicated that the policy decisions that relate to the third bill that won't be introduced until December will be announced in the middle of this year. So that is helpful. It means that we'll have information to inform the development of our water services delivery plan, and that will also give us some more information about the options to access longer term borrowing. And the Minister has signalled that some of those options for longer term borrowing will be dependent on working together, so there'll be some choices to consider there. And that third bill will also include the economic regulation and oversight by the Commerce Commission. The second bill that is coming up imminently, though, is the one that will streamline the CCO establishment process that already exists under the Local Government Act, and that will set some minimum consultation and information requirements, but also allow us to set up a joint committee if we choose to consult across multiple districts and make recommendations, rather than each individual council who might be choosing to work together to have to do that separately. And that is also expected to allow us to consider the collective benefits and impacts of a proposal across multiple districts, rather than only having to give consideration to our own. All of that will inform the water services delivery plan that we have to deliver, and for the first time it's been confirmed, it's been somewhat implicit but not explicit, that will be a one-off transition plan, which implies again that expectation of a change in how we do things. That will have to be delivered within 12 months of the bill passing, but within 3 months we've now been told we'll have to tell the DIA what we intend to do, whether we intend to develop that plan individually or jointly with other councils. It will cover a 10-year period. Despite sounding an awful lot like another document that we all know so well, it won't have any regulatory function, so the LTP will remain our primary document for accountability and planning purposes. And it will be up to us to determine how best to engage with our communities. So I think we'll need to give that some serious thought as we begin to make decisions and work out how we're going to deliver and develop that plan. And there was a little bit of clarity around the Crown support that might be forthcoming. As we've sort of previously discussed, and as was expected, there's no new money coming through for this. There was, however, confirmation that we would retain our transition funding and any unspent Better Off funding, but the DIA will be contacting us to discuss how that might be able to be redirected to infrastructure investment or work on our water services delivery plans. So we'll hopefully hear from them shortly and be able to have a helpful and constructive conversation about that. And the only indication of any help whatsoever is a request that we can request a Crown facilitator if we should choose, but we will be charged for the privilege. So I think that probably gives you a fairly fair indication of where the government's thinking is on that. So that is all the new information. As I say, I'm happy to take questions on either that or anything that is in the paper and go from there.
Thank you. I might just kick off the first question. In relation to the regional approach, the time that we've got to indicate whether there will be a regional approach. And on page 25, you talk about the work package in terms of the proposed overall regional approach and which of the options will be worked through. What is our thinking about, will we be able to, well, the first question I guess is, how detailed does that indication within the next 3 months need to be? How far on are we in terms of ability to meet that deadline meaningfully and well informed?
So that is taking a considerable amount of time, energy and effort at the moment by myself and colleagues across all 7 councils, and also for colleagues internally who need to be supporting that work. It is a tight program, but it is a doable program, I think. So we have, that work is underway and progressing quickly. I think by the sort of the middle of May, we will have beginnings of indicative findings to begin to share back with councillors potentially, and that deadline of the mayoral meeting in June to present those final findings. So it's ambitious but possible. I think there's 2 things working in our favour. One is doing that assessment at a high enough and strategic level to keep the task manageable, but at the same time making sure there's sufficient detail to be robust to make a decision. So that balance is quite important, and we're kind of working through that. The other point is that we are working from a lot of information that already exists, and it's about collation. So our long-term plans are all in a similar sort of state of being. That's some of the best information we've got, and we're utilising as much of the information that we'd had to collate for the NTU's process, the National Transition Units process, to sort of recycle and make best use of that. So we're not sort of starting from scratch. It's more about pulling together what we've got.
Thank you. So in terms of indication, what does indication mean in terms of a political perspective? So what I'm hearing is that the information discussions, high level strategy going forward, and I do want to ask in a bit more detail around number 19 in terms of what the work streams or the work package 3 means. Mm-hmm. What about does it need all the councils and mayors and councillors to have signed up to the indication by the end of 3 months? Because it sounds pretty difficult.
Yes.
What does that indication mean in terms of political agreement or?
The indication to DIA?
Yes.
That is about as much information as we have, beyond the fact that they've said you will have 12 months to do this plan, and they've introduced this intermediary deadline of 3 months, because they're obviously not wanting all of us to leave it till the very last minute. So I think it is as simple as that. We will need to prepare that plan inside 12 months. It will still be an ambitious piece of work. We will have time, I think, through July, August, September for all of those conversations to be worked through in some detail with councils, councillors, mayors, collectively or not, and then to have time to develop that plan. So it is going to be tight, but it is becoming the sort of the legislative timeline that we will work to. David.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to add to what Catherine said and maybe get to the point you were raising around the political side of things. The work that we're doing as a region is assessing the viability of a regional entity to deliver Three Water services. But part of that work is also looking at a sensitivity or stress testing of that entity if any individual or several councils chose to go alone or make their own alternative arrangements. The point of that is then management will be able to give each council the opportunity then to provide their political input into it, knowing what is technically possible and at what point does Manawatu Wanganui Three Waters entity become unviable because too many of the individual councils are going and making their own arrangements. Alongside that regionalised work, Catherine and the team are then also looking at what are the other alternative options that may work for Wanganui. That includes us continuing to go alone or joining other regions and their entities. Again, the purpose of the work is to give you the technical information so then you can provide your political input to it, knowing what is possible and what is not possible.
So might it be as simple as, yes, we would entertain dating our neighbours, but we wouldn't get engaged. We don't have to commit one way or the other, let alone get married.
My sense, without prejudging the legislation, is that by that month 3, we will probably have to say whether or not we're intending to get engaged and married or not.
We would.
That's my, and I might be very wrong, but I think that might be a live possibility. I think it's this stage where we're definitely dating without any commitment.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Just diving into the detail a little bit more in terms of the work package. Can we fix that? No? So MW minus Horowhenua, MW minus Wanganui.
So this is, as David was saying, the sensitivity testing of different scenarios. So we're looking at high-level financial modelling of if you amalgamated all 7 into one entity, what would be the sort of balance sheet position, what would be the long-term capital, funding, operational expenses, etc. And then we're testing that as to if one or more fell away, does what's left remain viable? So if Horowhenua was to go south, for example, or to go by itself, if Tararua was to go by itself or to go with Hawke's Bay, etc., etc. So around the margins, certainly, and then being left with a centre, and then also that that option of if we were to go in 2 halves, essentially.
Okay. All right, thank you. Josh, I think you were the first.
Yeah, Josh.
Light on the board.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just a little confused around timelines, and just want to clarify the work of the technical advisory group will presumably answer questions around, you know, how balance sheet separation can be achieved, how debt can be raised, all that sort of stuff. And how does that advice fit in with the timeline that we need to make the decision? And I just can't quite work it out in my head at the moment.
Is that the government's technical advisory group?
Yeah, all the information that we will be provided with to actually make an informed decision about what the best arrangement is for us, because that funding and financing question is critical here.
So the technical advisory group's original terms of reference, and they haven't been updated yet, is that they conclude their work on the 30th of June. That is their term at present, by which point the government has indicated they hope to have the first piece of legislation passed, which will move us a long way forward. And alongside that, they're saying that they will make the policy announcements about all those other bits at the same time. So I think they're expecting the TAG to have done all of that work and to be able to give us enough of the policy framework to make meaningful decisions.
So we'll have all of that prior to the introduction of the second bill.
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Andrew, Rob and Michael?
Yeah, look, this is obviously very fluid, so and complex. I get all that. I'm just I haven't actually talked to Palmerston North Mayor Grant Smith, but they're proposing, I think it's a $647 million wastewater treatment plant, which is going to be funded by the Crown Infrastructure Fund. Could Palmerston North still be part of a Three Waters entity without the wastewater treatment plant in it? In other words, it's ring fenced.
Sorry, that is an admission in the paper. That is part of the work, is to look at that ring fenced out and to have it included. And I think there's some useful discussion to have around that and that approach.
Yeah.
No. Michael?
Just a clarification. All this work that's been required for this, and obviously keeping you up at night, is this required under legislation for you to do this work, or as elected members opted for this approach? Like, have we had any sort of appetite for this change?
The choice to do this work now is a choice. I think there are some councils who have said we would prefer to wait until the legislation comes through. I would be being kept up awake at night if that's what we were doing, because we will hit, the minute that legislation is passed, we will have 12 months to do something really ambitious. And if we haven't started all those conversations, particularly given how politically nuanced and complex it will be, we would be on a hiding to nothing, to be completely frank. So I think this puts us in a really good position to have informed and evidence-based decisions around something that is quite challenging.
I understand that. Just to clarify, though, it's still based on the presumption that there's appetite in this room to even entertain the idea of regionalisation. If there aren't appetite in this room for regionalisation at all, then we would never consider it at all.
I think probably it would be helpful to David to jump in and just back up the truck a little bit and remind us how this work got to be.
Yeah. So, because I understand where Councillor Law's coming from, so I'll try my best to cover this off. This started off, the transition process started off as mandatory activity under the previous Labour government. It is fully funded through the transition funding that they made available, so Catherine and the team are not being paid for by ratepayers at the moment. With the change of government and the policy reset, we've now gone back into a discretionary holding space in anticipation that when the legislation is passed, we're going to be mandated to do the work. So we're just, again, the resources there, we've got the team established, we're well underway with the work. It is prudent to prepare our community for a potential change. What I would say, though, is there's absolutely nothing here that predetermines that a regionalised Three Waters delivery is the outcome that will be achieved. And as I said a few minutes ago, one of the alternative options that we're looking at is Whanganui going on its own and effectively maintaining a version of the status quo where we continue to deliver our own Three Waters. Where we want to get to is, one, be well prepared for the legislative change, but two, make sure that you as elected members and the ultimate decision makers are also well informed as to what the full suite of options is, whether it's a Manawatu Whanganui regional, or if we choose to go north and join Taranaki, or if we continue to go on our own.
And I would add that that is my memory of that. Us as elected members have been very supportive of that direction of travel. In other words, to be well informed when we get to have to make a decision, and nothing is predetermined. Peter.
Yes, quick question. The if we decide to go alone, my understanding from the reading is that we could rejoin or in a 10-year period of on a regional basis. So if we get it wrong, going alone, we can then just say start dating again with our fellow regions.
Yes, I think there is in principle nothing that would stop changing that conversation being a different one. I suppose the one thing that you will need to consider when you come to consider this decision is that if, for example, we were to go it alone and everyone else was to join up, and then in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time we were to turn around and say, actually, we've changed our minds.
Yeah, we're sick of being lonely.
The context will have changed in lots of ways. Everyone might have forgiven us for going it alone, or they might suddenly need us lots more than we need them. We don't know, but I think that is a really important consideration, but to be balanced against the fact that there is the possibility that those conversations could happen in the future as well.
Cool, thank you.
Rob?
Thank you. Just perhaps a question for David. I'm heartened by your comments about what you said about the possibilities of going alone. The 10-year plan starts with that assumption that we are going alone, and so someone has to evaluate a better option for us to warrant joining with someone else. So who would undertake that? Would that need to be an external process, or do you think there's skills within this council that can manage that?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's actually probably going to be a combination, and it's part of the work that's already underway. So we have some consultancy support from GHD, who are picking up work that they did a few years ago for the region before the Labour reforms proposal really gathered momentum. So yeah, look, you're right to reference our long-term plan as well. If I can have the luxury of a few comments. The long-term plan has been put together on the basis that we are going to continue to deliver Three Waters. We've significantly increased the investment in renewals and maintenance. There are a lot more projects in the long-term plan than the previous one for upgrades to make sure we meet rising standards and that we can accommodate growth in our community. So I think it's a very complete and comprehensive plan, and as you can see, our balance sheet can take it quite comfortably, and I think us going alone is a credible option, and we're fortunate to be in, well, maybe not fortunate because it's taken effort by this council and previous councils to maintain a good strong position where we can deliver safe drinking water to the right standards, and our assets are in comparatively very good condition compared to other regions. For me, I think the deciding factor is the genuine cost efficiency that can bring the cost of Three Waters down for our community, and that would be one of the most compelling reasons to join with our regional neighbours. We're going to do the work, both as officers with GHD support, to do that analysis, so again, you'll be well informed to make that decision as to whether we do or don't.
And the other question, David, if I may, is that I read about the mayoral forum and I read about the discussions amongst chief executives, and I guess the worry might be that we're heading down a path. So can you assure us that there will always be a way out of this journey, and we're not committed to something later down the track?
Yes, absolutely. And for your peace of mind, the terms of reference and the brief for the project is very explicit that individual councils are the decision makers around whether they do or do not join a regional entity. The steering group, which I'm chairing with my fellow CEs, is simply a vehicle to deliver the technical work so that councils are informed of their options. But no decisions will be made at the mayoral forum, and no decisions will be made by the chief executives.
Thank you.
Andrew, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to respond to that from a mayoral forum perspective. So what I would say is the mayoral forum discussions are one of general direction and an open dialogue, and any direction that we make, not even decisions, I would say, would come to this table. Hence, we're here now giving an update. But when it comes to decision time, whenever that may be, that is up to us to make that decision. And I don't believe I even have the mandate to make that decision in isolation from you anyway. So I'd see a decision paper come into this council. The only other addition I would say is that sometimes a decision might not all be about the numbers, the financial part. That's obviously a major consideration for us for intergenerational. From an intergenerational perspective, but there might be other ways, other benefits of collaboration with other neighbouring councils, whatever that's sub-regional, cross-regional, or regional. So there's
So just as a follow-on from that, in terms, I mean, it's very clear, and thank you for confirming it, Mr. Mayor, that you don't have the mandate to make a decision about what we do in the Three Waters space. What would be like the thinking around our responsibility to consult with our community, whatever our preferred option might be?
That's going to need some thinking. So I think one of the things that has come through in this announcement on Friday that is very helpful is being a bit clearer about what those streamlined consultation processes would look like if we were to be moving in a regional direction. So that's helpful to have that clarity. I think we also need a little bit more information about what that consultative process looks like outside of that decision if we were to be going alone. And I think we need to work that up a little bit more and bring it back to you guys once we've understood the implications of Friday's announcement a little bit more.
Okay, so yet to be determined is what I'm hearing.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. If I can quickly describe the status quo requirements, our significance and engagement policy would require us to consult on this because our Three Water networks are listed as our significant assets. Not only that, current legislation, the Local Government Act, requires councils to consult if you want to set up a CCO, council-controlled organisation. What we're not sure of, and as Catherine has just outlined, is how much of those requirements will be overridden by the new streamlining process.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any further questions? I am going to ask management to put this as a recurring item on our work plan. So, you know, even if there's nothing, you know, not a whole lot to report on, it's good to just hear a little bit of, whatever progress is made in the interim to the next meeting.
Certainly.
So thank you very much, Catherine. I'll move that we receive the report, Three Waters Reform Update, Local Water Done Well. Josh will second. Is there any discussion? Michael.
I just wanted to be absolutely clear and frank that I have no appetite whatsoever for any sort of regionalisation of RY, and that every time we have centralised, we have had bad outcomes for our society and our district. So bearing some unprecedented information from the officers, I will not be supporting any movement towards regionalisation for water.
Rob?
Thank you. Yes, I'm quite reassured by the conversation that we've had here today from both the Chief Executive and the Mayor, that this will be a final decision that elected members will have a say in. And whether it goes to the community, perhaps they will have a say in it as well. You know, I think we need the community to understand that our Three Waters network is affordable. At the moment, if you look at the 10-year plan, look at the proposed rate increases from year 2 onwards, we're talking about no more than the rate of inflation, and the Chief Executive assures us that there is funding in there sufficient for our Three Waters network? So I think any talk, which is basically scare tactics in a way, that in the future council is going to be hiking up the rates to an unaffordable level, I think needs to be countered by this council, because that is not going to happen. So now we've got a situation where we know what it's going to cost us in the next 10 years. If there's any talk of regionalisation at all, it can only be implemented if the Whanganui community is better off by taking that action. And I agree with the Mayor's comment that being better off is not necessarily only funding, but the cost of it is a very important element of it to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Helen?
Thank you. Look, it worries me actually when we constantly reiterate that we're okay, because it's water networks and sewage networks and plants are big beasts. There's a lot of it, and you know, something will happen tomorrow, something major burst or something that just about what you do, and we'll look silly. I think that we have a really good team who are managing a very complex and ageing asset really well, and we have invested for quite some time, probably more so than the bigger cities, and so I'm reasonably confident, but I think that I do worry. The new investment we'll make over the next 10 years, I think we're consulting on the LTP as well worth that investment. It does worry me that standards are always increasing. Standards of water quality are always increasing, and we don't really know where that's going to go. Standards of treatment will probably always be increasing, and whatever resource consents we have are probably going to get tougher and tougher. So the future is unknown. What I really want to ensure is efficiency. And there are, because of the increasing complexities of plants and networks, we're going to want to have the best professional advice and staff managing those we can. And in many cases, lots of smaller councils can't afford that. And a lot of it is very specialist knowledge. So at the very least, I would like to see agreements where we are working together to share our funding resource in terms of staff, so that we actually can have the best advice as we're moving forward. And maybe that's like the old Ministry of Works model, where you had an office in a particular area and there was specialist knowledge you could go to on the roading network or something. You know, it was like a hub of specialist knowledge. And that could be regionalised, because I think you have your regions, but that would certainly help the smaller councils, and we're still on the small side. That would help us. You still can own your own staff, but there would be places you could go to for that specialist knowledge, or maybe we become that hub for specialist of knowledge. So that's, you know, I think we should always be looking at change, what is a better model, and sitting as isolated councils trying to do our own thing, I don't think is the future, but I'm not wedded to the idea of actually combining our assets with others, because I think that's a problem. But certainly working together, we should be looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you, team. Good discussion. Oh, sorry, Charlie.
Thank you.
Didn't see.
Just following on from Councillor Craig, I wonder if the Chief Executive could reassure us that there's no surprise around the corner, expensive surprises regarding the disposal of the waste from the wastewater treatment plant.
No, we're past question time. We're in debate.
I'm concerned there's a problem with the wastewater treatment plant.
Well, if you want to bring that up, here's not the place. Do you want to speak to the motion? You don't want to speak to the motion, Charlie? No. All right. Thank you. Good debate, folks. Thank you, Catherine, for your work and your report. I look forward to us being very well informed on next steps, and yeah, really appreciate it, where we are in terms of our forward thinking, our engagement and information gathering. So thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. All right, thank you. We're on to item 5.3, the Whanganui Social Housing Model. Welcome, Lauren and Sarah.
Kia ora, and thank you for the opportunity to present this paper today. I just want to start by saying that what we're looking at is a big shift from what we've done in the past, and so we need to just remember that our thinking is changing, and this is bigger than that. So I'll take the paper as read, but I would like to just point out a couple of highlights from the paper, or key points. So our housing development demand is greater than what Whanganui can keep up with. Our population's growing, and it's not just our elderly population, but our population in general. And so to keep up with demand, we will need an additional 2,000 homes over the next 10 years. 1,000 of these approximately will come through the current market, and I've looked back at the building reports, and we've had 1,200 in the last 10 years, and so that's residential living units. So there might have been a building that had 6 units, and it's counted as 6. So that's taking care of part of the market, but we've got a shortfall, and so the Housing Reference Group 2 years ago looked at what we estimated our need for housing was, and we estimated at that point that we would need at least 800 homes. Now that was taking into account what was on the MSD social housing register at the time, but also people that were living in unsafe, overcrowded housing or couch surfing. The council, we don't have access to the 300 million plus sort of money that we will need to increase the housing in Whanganui, and we're not eligible for the government housing funding, like community housing provider subsidies or other eligible funding. So a separate entity where financial revenue and liability can be ring-fenced will not only open central government funding opportunities, but it will also limit our council exposure. We've reviewed a number of housing models in New Zealand, and all of these have been slightly different, but they all address housing across the continuum except for emergency housing. Queenstown Lakes Community Trust have been leading the way. They have a voluntary inclusionary housing clause in their with their work, and this has given them access to funding, land or completed units that help build up their portfolio. In December 2022, we received a report on our older people's housing. Our current portfolio was built between 1946 and 1988. And actually the units in, I think it's Nixon Street, were built in, some of them were built in 1946 and some of them were built in 1988. So that they've got the oldest and the youngest set of units across that complex. The others were built all in between that time. So the majority are approaching or past their economic life. The Turley's report and recommendations will form a big part of the work that will be looked at by the Trust. The report identified that we needed 190 new units and that we can potentially achieve 126 of these through redesign and infill at existing sites. However, part of that work will focus on looking at greenfield sites as well. So finally, we have put together some additional work on the next steps since our workshop and have a draft timeline showing where the work will be done concurrently. Essentially, the business case will be completed by November 24. We will then go out for consultation on the transfer of assets, and all going to plan, work on transition to the new entity will begin in June 2025. We will need resource to ensure that we can get this work completed on time, and that the business case, to ensure that the business case is completed on time, but this will be funded out of Better Off Funding housing allocation. So I'll take the paper as read, and if there are any questions.
Thank you, Lauren and Sarah. Great paper and exciting potential. My first question, before I open it up to the floor, is from a current resident of a pensioner unit, what should I expect to see in terms of effect to them if council makes these changes?
I can start answering that. So if we do the transition as we've proposed, what they can expect to see and experience is they will have access to much more suitable homes for themselves. That's a very real positive outcome for them. In terms of the transition, if that's what your question was referring mostly to.
The whole thing. I'm thinking, you know, say I'm living in a pensioner unit.
Now?
I care about where I live.
Yep.
What surety or what certainty have I got that I'm not going to be tipped out of my home?
Okay. So that is work that we've got to define, but our principles around that will be that they have certainty of their homes, and that any change to one or all of the complexes will require detailed transitional plans on their own. So we will need to, that's part of the resourcing conversation that that Lauren alluded to, we will need to get people that come in alongside those units and work out plans where people are not displaced. If we're going to develop sites, we will need to have people come out of their current lodgings, where they're living, so that we can develop it. But the transitional plans will be bespoke and catered and tailored unit by unit, complex by complex.
Great. Thank
So
you.
that's all detail that we have to work up. I can't give specifics right now.
But there should be no anxiety that.
There shouldn't be,
No.
yeah. With the ultimate outcome being that they will have much more suitable homes to live in moving forward.
Yeah, which is exciting. Jenny.
Thank you. Given that this conversation is happening in the public arena, and in the past any conversations around any form of change to pensioner housing has caused anxiety, have our tenants already been spoken to about the fact that there is something going to be happening and that they're going to be okay?
We haven't spoken to the tenants about this paper and the options. No, that will all come following and as part of the business case process. So we haven't had conversations, no.
Because my concern is that once we put this into the public arena, that there could be some form of change, we automatically cause anxiety, because that is what has happened in the past, because they're not fully informed and do not know what the process is going to be.
Yep, fair point. My response to that is we don't know what the process is going to be yet either. We're working all of that up.
Yeah, but we can get that message out there to help remove uncertainty and anxiety. Rob.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah, in the paper talks about on page 29 the asset valuation of the pensioner housing portfolio, $39.740 million. Is that a recent valuation, or is it a market valuation, or what is it based on?
It's a rateable valuation.
A
The
rateable.
rateable valuation. We haven't done a market valuation.
Okay.
It's rateable.
Okay. And one of the benefits of becoming a community housing provider is that there is, I think, a $30 a week subsidy for rentals for accessible by a CHP. Has that been given consideration for our current tenants, if this comes into place, of passing that on?
So first, the entity would need to be a chip provider.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the subsidies, the income related subsidies follow where there is entitlement. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it's likely then that with this change to a CHP, that our tenants would be better off.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you.
no. My understanding is that current tenants that transfer to a new entity aren't eligible for the uplift. I know that was the experience of Wellington anyway, but we can sort that out. It makes no difference to the tenant, it actually makes a difference to the landlord. So it's the same for the tenant. Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a report. It's now in the public arena that we're considering a transfer to a community housing provider. So it's on. The discussion is out there. A couple of questions. You stated that this will give them better housing opportunities. Absolutely, it does. A couple of questions. Security of tenure. So when it transfers to a CHP, they have security of tenure here under certain conditions, one or two. Does that cross over to a CHP, that they will have that security similar to what they have now?
That's what I've just heard, that there shouldn't be anxiety about your tenure. I've just heard the answer to the first question.
I heard anxiety, I didn't hear the security of tenure part. Lack of, yeah.
Well, I think that question's already been answered.
Okay.
Yes.
What does it...
Just a minute, Ross. David?
Look, through you, Madam Chair, just for the sake of clarity, and also for the sake of anybody that may be listening in online and our media colleagues, this proposal has no intention to disrupt our current tenants in our older persons housing portfolio. We want them to continue to live in the facilities that we're providing. This is being put forward as a vehicle for maximising the number of houses that council can provide in the older person space, so that we can deal with the recommendations from the Turley report, but then to also broaden the scope of what we do to provide affordable social housing beyond older persons. And as you've seen in the report, the demand for housing is somewhere of the order of 1,000 dwellings greater than what the current market is producing over the next 10 years. The housing concept that's before you is a vehicle for achieving that outcome, whilst also continuing to look after our existing tenants. New tenants will likely benefit financially because of the central government funding that this housing entity would get access to. So it's designed to be a win-win for everybody. Existing tenants, new tenants, and the wider community that are already struggling with a shortage of housing stock in the city. Hopefully that's clear, explicit, and categoric. Last thing we want to do is upset our existing tenants.
And the part two of that, for clarity, is should it go to a transfer to CHP, is it correct that all those properties would then go to, if the term is correct, market rental pricing? And if that's correct, they then automatically, because of the nature of the provider, qualify for the rental support to match or support them?
So that's part of the work that we'll do as part of the business case. We're looking at what a community housing provider, what those opportunities are, and so right from the very beginning, once we start looking at the business case, we will also start looking at the process to become a community housing provider, so that we take all of that into account.
Right, third and final.
I'll just hop in there too. I mean, social housing is social housing. social and public housing. They are, the benefit of them is that they attract rental subsidies. Doesn't matter how. So let's just remind ourselves that this is about social housing. This is about subsidised rentals and a whole lot of other things for the tenants. So to be talking about market rentals from a tenant's perspective, I just think we need to be really careful because it's not an issue from a tenant's perspective.
That's why I want clarity, because we're in a public space, because those comments will come at us very quickly, and if we're clear now, we are reducing the level of anxiety very quickly. So I appreciate the responses. My third and final part is, and I know this is a given, you know, you've got 276 units, correct? Yeah. And they're not really aware until today, perhaps in a few days from now. Will there be, I think this is a no-brainer, but will there be some sort of plan of how you will consult as this progresses with those 275 units?
That was my answer to Councillor Jenny's question. Yes, there will be a plan. We haven't got it yet, but there will be one.
Oh, it's not so much the plan, it's about how we draw in our people into that. As it unfolds, how we keep them informed.
So to be clear, part of the plan will be how it unfolds, to use your language.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to circle back to your second point, Councillor Ross, and again for the sake of clarity, the intention is that this proposed model gives access to central government funding so that, for two reasons, one, we can keep the rents affordable to our tenants, but two, it brings in additional revenue that can then be used to fund a further house building programme so the portfolio can be expanded without it being a burden on the ratepayer.
That's what I was hoping to hear for the others.
Great, thank you. We've got you your answers finally, Ross. Any further questions? All right, we'll put the recommendation then that the Strategy and Policy Committee receive the Whanganui Social Housing Model paper. Yep, thank you. So Jenny's moved and Glenda would like to second. Speakers to the motion? Jenny, you go, sorry.
Thank you. I strongly support this and really appreciate the work that's been done up till now. I think that the social housing space is complex and the solutions aren't straightforward and do take time. So I appreciate the time it's going to take to get us to where we need to be. My earlier question around anxiety to our current tenants is, however, a real comment, and there will be people who may well be listening to this who may well speak to an elderly or older person about it. And so I just encourage that as we progress, we just keep our tenants informed that, hey, this is a really, really, really good thing, that they're going to get immense benefit from it. It's something to look forward to. So when they're going to be maybe short-term moved, they won't be displaced. They'll be taken care of, you know. So I just think in our languaging, we just be very careful about how we engage with some of these people, because they are not always well informed and they are not in control of their own spaces. So keep up the good work, though. I think this is fantastic, so thank you.
Helen?
Thank you. I want to thank our Chief Executive, David Langford, because I might be wrong, but I believe that this is a major initiative he's brought to the table. It's probably one of the most exciting things that's actually come across the table, because it is actually a plan for us to rapidly, or not rapidly, because nothing's rapid these days, but to increase significantly our community housing. And we all know that there's not enough housing in Whanganui, especially for those who can't afford market rentals. And there should be absolutely no anxiety by current tenants or those looking to go in the future. In fact, there should be excitement. And I don't believe they'll be any worse off. I think they'll actually be a lot better off. Though, you know, we're looking at, in the longer term, it would look at upgraded housing, there'd be a lot more opportunity for others to take it up. It's probably be in a better environment, and part of this whole package would be better sort of social care for people. So I'm really hoping, and I think this has got really good legs to happen. If anybody listening in the public, the Queenstown Lakes community housing project, it's online, they've got a link, and that will give them some idea of what they've achieved in that area. And I just want to thank all our staff who will be heavily involved in some background work on this into the future, and fingers crossed it'll all come off really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Glenda?
Thank you. I definitely, first of all, thank you for all the work that's gone into this so far. I definitely support work to go into investigating a community housing trust, whatever that looks like, but it's a very smart move to be investigating this to bring affordable housing to our region. I support the business case, which will give us options, solid options, I think, with the data that will be presented in that for the next steps. And I really look forward to seeing this come to fruition. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenda. Rob?
Thank you. Yes, I also strongly support the formation of a community housing provider. The first principle, as far as I'm concerned, is that social housing is not the responsibility of the ratepayer. And while we go through that process, I believe we need to keep that in mind. And a community housing provider ring fences that liability away from council. And that's one of its great advantages. And the other advantage is the partnership opportunities that open up. The access to the income-related rents that was mentioned. Possible operational funding from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. And the private equity funding opportunities that become available by a body such as this. Now, with moving our existing tenants into new properties will happen in the future. So the question arises, what do we do with the old ones, what we've got now? And I want to raise this point again, that the real problem facing this community is in emergency housing. We have a situation here where MSD is giving people funding to buy a tent to go and put up, down and along the river edge or wherever around this community. This is the answer for emergency housing. So here we have an opportunity. If we are going to move this portfolio into a community housing provider, we have several complexes that make ideal opportunities for housing emergency tenants. 16 unit complexes that would be ideal, single unit complexes, which are ideal for that sort of opportunity. And I hope we take it up and we need to do that quickly. That is our opportunity, and I think the market and the longer term view will take care of the growth of the housing and things that we need as part of this vehicle. But council must turn its eye to emergency housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Ross, then Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I didn't sound enthused because on occasions I play devil's advocate. I am all for this proposal moving forward. I know the pluses. Sometimes I just want to hear the pluses that I think haven't been put out there. So I just want that on record. If I understood correctly, we started building these units around about just after the war, 1948 onwards. So 75-year-old stock, not persons, stock buildings. We can't keep maintaining them and fixing them and bringing them up to standard without, and this goes back to Annette Main's time as mayor, without significant cost to the ratepayer. And when it came up during Mayor Annette Main's time, there was a very strong push to sell it off and it was Graham Adams from the then Ratepayers Association who said basically there should be modest annual incremental increases, and that's where it turned, and we protected our social housing. But we can't continue because it will come onto the ratepayer significantly, and there's already pressures. So my conclusion is the future is bright. There may be some nervous questions, but I very much support the opportunities that can come forward. Regard to emergency housing, I think that's worth exploring. The problem is we can't on one hand say that housing is not our role, but we have social housing. We cannot say housing is not our role, and we did dip into a very modest attempt to take the point edge off homelessness. Are we in? Are we out? But this is a great proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Andrew.
Yeah, first of all, just a thank you to council officers for bringing this to the table today. You know, one of the things that enthused me with your first comment, Lauren, was that we need to do something different. This is bigger than it has been before. We need to be bold, bolder than we've ever been. We need to be collaborative. We need to look at new ways of delivering for our housing future for Wanganui for the next 10 years and beyond. You know, one of the basic of human needs and a measure of dignity is having a roof over your head, and everyone who wants a roof over their head today should have one that they can call home. And we need to, as a socially conscious council, deliver on that. So I'm pleased with what you're saying today. The other point as well is that, as I think Councillor Rob has mentioned, that there is no cost to the ratepayer here. This is something that is outside of that, but it certainly should be a big emphasis for us over the next 10 years and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, thanks to the team, Lauren, Sarah, David. It's fantastic that this slow boil plan has finally made it to this table, so it's really exciting. I think we have the opportunity to do some real good in our community in terms of developing, providing more housing, using not so much the cost, not as a cost to the ratepayer, but to use the weight of our balance sheet, which will enable building at scale for our community. So thank you very much. I look forward to further developments. We have the recommendation that we receive the Wanganui Social Housing Model report, and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. I suggest we just take a couple of minutes pause before we get into the last couple of items, but only just 2 minutes, so if you need to go to the restroom, go very quickly. welcoming the Deputy Chief Executive, Mr. Lance Kennedy. So, Hannah and Elise. Oh, and you're an authoriser on this as well, Lance, so quite timely that you're here.
Checking what meeting we're on, so give me a sec.
Right. Kia ora koutou. Thank you. So this is the legislation and consultation update, and the purpose of this report is to keep council informed of legislation, consultation, reviews and other policy decisions which have the potential to impact on the council or the wider district. So we've changed the format a little bit. So we've just, because there's been so much legislation which has either been introduced or passed or in progress or planned. So hopefully this format is working for you. As you'll see, there's been quite a bit of legislation which has passed, and the vast majority under urgency. However, I believe now the government is through their first 100 days that is expected to slow down now. We've also included a couple of pieces of legislation which did not pass, just we thought those may be of interest. Those were Labour-led bills, which didn't get through. And then we've also provided, as always, an update on recent consultations and attached the consultation on, the submission on the government policy statement on land transport, which Damien Wood, our transport manager, led, and it was largely a submission which supported Taituara's submission on this matter. In terms of upcoming consultations, so there's a number on the go, the Fast Track Approvals Bill. So I think that's been fairly well publicised around the government's bill to streamline decision-making processes. So there is a short submission being prepared on that by Justin's team. In addition, the Horizons Regional Council also has its long-term plan open at the moment until 20 April, so we're preparing a submission on that, and Councillor Charlotte has been helping provide some input to that, which I think she's coordinated with you. And then in addition, as Catherine discussed in her piece, there's a number of large pieces of local water done well, is what we're calling at the moment, bills coming down the line, one in mid-year. We will, of course, submit on that on the assumption that we are given the opportunity to do so and it's not passed through under urgency. We're assuming that councils will be given the opportunity. And then the second bill at the end of the year, which will be the more detailed bill, providing the framework for economic regulation and the more detailed powers and duties of the water CCOs. Otherwise, we're happy to take the paper as read and answer any questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elise. Any questions? I think this is a very comprehensive list of what's happening out there and outlines our opportunities to submit or not. Rob, got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask on the gang legislation amendment bill whether the government has consulted with the Wanganui District Council, as probably the only council with experience of that. Are they taking our advice?
I'll let Hannah talk to that one, but I think it's at the time of writing, it hadn't passed, correct?
Yeah, so as far as we know, currently it hasn't passed, but it was a court of urgency, so it also is being pushed through without consultation.
Did we put in a submission, or have we had the opportunity?
We've not had the opportunity.
Okay.
Those bills pass under urgency mean none of those were provided the opportunity for consultation. Yeah.
What it is to know, to think you know everything, eh? All right. No further questions? We'll put the recommendation then that the Strategy and Policy Committee receives the report, Legislation and Consultation Update, February 2024. Ross will move that. Thank you, Charlotte. Any debate, comment? Josh, Charlotte? Yep.
Just a very brief one on the Gangs Legislation Amendment Bill. Free speech and free expression is meant to be one of the hallmarks of right-wing politics, and I will say that I was surprised that a government with a Libertarian Party as part of the coalition would propose a bill that limits free expression. Poor form, in my view. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Josh. Charlotte?
Thank you.
I can see a few soapboxes coming out. Go on.
You'll see what comes from that one. Hey, I just want to remind the public that not only is the Horizons long-term plan currently up for consultation until the 2nd of next month, but as is the Wanganui District Council long-term plan, and we are really looking forward to getting many submissions on both counts.
Fantastic. Thanks for your work on that, Charlotte. So we'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Strategy and Policy Committee Work Programme 2024. Is it you, Elise?
No.
Or is it Lance?
No, it's me. Yeah, it's me. It's me, and it's. I'm actually just going to take this as read. My only comment would be really what you can see in there is the depth of the work that lies ahead. In terms of, there's nothing there that you would say is simple that we can just get through. A lot of work sits behind some of those very small ticks.
Yes.
So happy to take any questions.
Elise, did you want to make a comment?
I'll just note that we will add the Three Waters standing item as requested for the future, and no further comments other than you'll notice the Vision for Wanganui work has moved down to on hold until post long-term plan, and then we'll pick that up again as long-term plan. As we've all talked about it a lot, but that is a significant piece of work that we need to get through. And great to see we've had 200 submissions so far, and really like to see more. Thank you.
Wow. That would be good. That would be well ahead of previous submission periods, wouldn't it? At this stage, or you're not counting?
I'm not actually sure. I'm not sure where we'll land. We often get quite a few at the start, and then they trickle off, and then we get quite a lot at the end, especially the organisations. We encourage people, if they're part of an organisation or a group, to submit. They can submit both as an individual with their individual views, as well as part of a group as well. So that's, I think it's good progress. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross and Jenny?
Thank you. Very quick. Freedom Camping bylaw, full review of bylaw to be completed by 2025. I always get confused by the word by. Does it mean we're doing it this year so we're ready for January, or does it mean we're doing it sometime in 2025?
To be fair, in that case, it is a little open because it will depend on our other workload and what we've got through, but we will start it this year with the view to complete it by the end of next year at the latest, in order to meet a reasonable deadline around reviewing it. I think, yeah.
So within the 18 months window?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jenny?
Thank you. My question might be a little bit rhetorical, but with the 200 that you've received so far, are you seeing any trends that you're allowed to tell us about?
I don't think it would be appropriate to share anything. I want everyone to submit on their own terms and their own views, and not unduly influence anyone. But we're seeing a really good spread in terms of demographics, in terms of ages, and across all different parts of the district. So keep it up. Thank you.
Fantastic. Very good. All right, we'll put the recommendation that the Strategy and Policy Committee receive the report, Work Programme 2024. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Peter. Any debate? Comments? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. All right, thank you. Before we close the meeting, I'll just let you know there was a question from a member of the committee in regard to cost of removal of sludge from the wastewater treatment plant. So the Chief Executive will have an update for us at the Operations Committee meeting in the morning, tomorrow morning. So you'll just have to wait a few hours for the answer there. Thank you all very much for your participation and contribution this afternoon, and indeed for this morning. Judd, I'm going to let you,
Certainly.
or ask you to close the meeting with a karakia.
Certainly. Karakia wakamutanga o tēnei hui hui. E oha ki runga ki a Ranganui, e oha ki raro ki a Papatūānuku, wakataranga, te kupu, te kōrero, te mahi, ki te pau o te ware, he taonga he mahi a muri, ka puta ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama, haumi e, hui e, taiki e.
Thanks,
Kia ora
everybody.
tātou.